All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Saturday. This is Roll Your Doom. I'm NorthShoreDM. Welcome to the Guild Superior. Man, I do that every time. Welcome to the Superior Adventurers Guild Twitch channel. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your support because this is the sort of thing that you do. If you like our content, please like, subscribe, whatever the things are, hit the little heart button, hit a notification button to find out when we go live next. You can also find us on Twitter at Guild Superior, which is, of course, why I always muck up saying the Superior Adventurers Guild, because everything we do is at Guild Superior. Later on in our chat today, towards the end of the session, we will have we'll take questions from you, the viewers who are live in our Twitch chat. You can use the chat command !question and type a question in, and towards the 5 to 10 minutes or so of the episode, we will ask some of those questions. Dave. Dave, hello.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm happy to be here right next to you, Chad.
Yeah.
No,
this
that
is
way. There we go.
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
It's backwards. Yeah, this is our special. This is our first ever interview episode. So of course I have my cohort, Dungeon Master Dave, with me, like live, as opposed to just always only in my ear.
Mm-hmm. Trying to distract you all the time in your ear.
Exactly. Sometimes I'm so easily distracted.
I know, it's so fun.
I think everybody who watches this show or knows me will know. Yeah. So hey, today we're talking with a really awesome game RPG writer and publisher, or person who publishes. You know what I mean? His name is Christian Zeuch. We're super excited to talk to him in a bit. Yeah. Hey, Dave.
Yes, sir.
Why don't you tell our viewers about some things that we have going on in our show?
Yeah,
on our
a couple of quick announcements before we dive into the actual interview with Christian. We do have we're taking a 1-episode hiatus from Beyond Saltmarsh this week, so we won't have an episode on the 17th, but we'll be back on the 24th. So just if you're tuning in for that on Wednesday, just know that we will be back the following week. And then Chad, you had an announcement about 2 weeks from today for Roll Your Doom.
So obviously it's been like a week or two since we've done an episode of Roll Your Doom. Part of that is because we had our Altered State one-shot last weekend. But we also kind of decided, at least for the time being, that we're only going to do every other week for this show, which brings me to my next point. Our next episode in 2 weeks, February 27th, right here on our Twitch channel, we will be interviewing Jeff Stevens, who is another fantastic writer and person who published his RPG content. And I'm super excited. He's the first person who ever interviewed me on the internet. So
your big debut on the Twitches.
Yeah. So now I'm gonna interview him. I'm excited.
That's great.
Yeah.
So thank you, Chad. Just really quick, I'm gonna bring in Christian here in a minute, but I just wanted to say, I think I first met Christian through a Curse of Strahd Facebook group. He was actually looking for some game testers for one of his more recent publications, and I'm always up for some gothic horror role playing. So I jumped on the opportunity and got to know him a little bit. And since then we've kept in touch, and I'm excited to bring him into the Roll Your Doom family with our first ever interview. Christian lives in Brazil, where he creates Dungeons and Dragons content, and he's been playing role-playing games since the late 90s. And he is a gamer, a father, a cartographer, and just a heck of a nice guy. And I'm going to bring Christian in here. Let's everybody welcome Christian. Hey, how you doing?
Hello, folks.
Thanks for being here today,
Thank you
Christian.
and thanks for the opportunity for being here. And also thank you for being a playtester back then.
Yeah.
It was very important.
That was fun. That was fun. And I want to ask you about playtesting when we get a little bit farther into this. But for folks who maybe don't know you, I was hoping that we could just start out super simple. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, specifically, in terms of your background in writing, and are you self-taught? Do you have a formal education in writing? Give us a little bit of background information into how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I am basically self-taught, very similar to English. I also learned English kind of a self-taught through, RPGs were one of the reasons I learned a lot of English, but also games, movies, music, and so on. But creative writing was something that happened because I loved RPG. I love to be a player, but I also started to get interested a little bit in DMing. So I really got started with DM a little bit more seriously around 2006, and I created a city called Tarondir. We used it in a 4th edition game back then in a campaign. And after this, I continued to write. Though after a while, I also switched to some published content because life got a little bit more hectic. So I started to look for official modules that could be interesting. And in November last year, I did go through a, let's say, formal learning about not specifically creative writing, but about publishing, which is the RPG Writers Workshop that is now called Storytelling Collective. It's really good. I really recommend it for new creators. In my case, since I had already published quite a few things back then, it was good because I learned a few things, but it served mostly as validation and also as a way to network with more people.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. I love the stuff that the Storytellers Collective, they do some amazing stuff. I love it.
Actually, Warren is really doing a great job. She has already nearly helped 10,000, I think 10,000 people. Wow. That's a lot of people.
Wow. Do you create in English? Are you writing your content in English, or are you writing it in a different language that you're more familiar with?
No, I have published some translations of my content to Portuguese, but I write in English because the market is better in English because you reach the whole world. And if I would go for Portuguese, I would be reaching only Brazil and maybe Portugal or some other countries. It's not the same. So I prefer to write in English because it's better, actually.
Follow-up question. Do you dream in English or Portuguese?
That's sometimes I think in English, but I don't recall about dreaming.
Okay. I suppose when you're in a dream, it really doesn't matter.
I don't recall about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, what's the RPG scene like in Brazil?
RPG scene like in Brazil, it's good. It's good. I mean, people like it. However, sometimes people, for instance, have some trouble. Let's talk about like DM's Guild or Drive Through RPG. Those websites, they require an international credit card. And not everyone in Brazil has an international credit card, so not everyone is able to consume this kind of product. So this is also something that's a bit more difficult. And people don't really like to learn about English, so they like Portuguese stuff.
So there's a bit of a, ultimately the language, there's a language and even I guess a technological economic barrier.
Yes. They see English as a barrier.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. But in my opinion, it's actually an opportunity, because if you manage to learn English, it's good for life. It's good. It can even be good. It can open doors and bring new opportunities. But that's a choice, and some people prefer to have their games in their own language.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you, Christian. You mentioned how you were creating content for a homebrew world, a setting, the Terrandir setting, right? Which, by the way, I'm going to drop a link in the chat for folks. Christian was kind enough to provide a promo code for the Terrandir book. Tell us about this book without spoiling it for someone who might play it. Give us a little heads up on what this particular product is about.
So Terrandir is a city setting, meaning that you can plug and play it in any setting, okay? But it has some guidelines for Forgotten Realms and Eberron. So it's a very inclusive and diverse city. It's a little bit more on the fantasy. It's more fantastic. So there is a gnome artificer who is like the responsible for the economy. He's a businessman. He created he owns an inn that's called Starlight Inn. So that's not a spoiler because it's a location in the city, so that's fine. And it's called Starlight Inn because it has an invisible rooftop. So people can go on an external area and have their drinks or food outside. And if it rains, they are protected because it's like an invisible rooftop. So it's kind of a little bit more fantastic than your maybe default city. But yeah, this product contains lots of hooks, NPCs, locations, and maps. There are like 35 unique maps, and with a total around 130 maps. So pretty much almost all locations. We were not able to map all locations because it's a lot more than 30 locations. But you have a map for the inn, the tavern, even the butchery has a map.
That's awesome.
That's great. You mentioned that you started out with the homebrew and then you sort of transitioned to more established modules in order to add content to existing. So like, for example, your the work you've done on the Ravenloft supplements. First of all, what inspired you to go after? I'm curious because I love Ravenloft as a setting. What inspires you about Ravenloft? You've put out a lot of content on Ravenloft.
Yeah, I put out quite a few, and I intend to put more actually. But what inspired me is I was once writing a homebrew adventure, and I got feedback on Reddit, and so one specific person was really thorough on their feedback, and I won't say harsh, but very detailed feedback. And this got me thinking, and they said my adventure was too linear, and that I should look into Curse of Strahd and Tomb of Annihilation. Back then, I never thought about looking into that. And then I took the advice and looked into Curse of Strahd. And I was, wow, this looks great. So let me take a better look at that. And I decided that I would DM it. So I bought the book. I have it here. I even highlighted, I have the pages like with some, how can I say, some stamps so I can easily access the chapters. And I went after more information to make it even a better experience. So I found the Curse of Strahd subreddit, which is awesome, full of great content and very rich. And I thought, well, this will be a great campaign. And I really put a lot of effort, month of preparation to DM this campaign. I ran some preludes with every player and their characters. So basically over WhatsApp, I DM their since their childhood. up to the day they started the adventure for 3 months with each one of them via text. I DM'd their life and connected them, every one of them, with the adventure.
Wow.
And the end result was that they were really, really deep into the characters, and it was the best campaign for every one of us.
I hope my players are not watching this right now, because I definitely did not do that. That's a lot. That's great, though.
It just makes it hurt more when you get brutally murdered by a random encounter.
That's very true.
Exactly.
That's
but
awesome,
then
though. That's
this
super
is
rad.
where, yeah, but this is where encounters with the dark powers come in, because I use them, not the module, of course, but I use that concept, and this was one of the reasons why I wasn't that worried in actually killing them. I know how hard it is to bring characters to Barovia. I mean, it's a closed plane. But with the dark powers, you can bring them back and also add up some very nice encounter, very deep, that will leave a mark on their soul, and they will remember that. And then I decided, why not do a product about that? And it was quite successful, actually.
That was the next question that I was curious about. Is at what point were you like, this content that I'm creating for my game is something that I should provide to other people and become, I should publish this. I should try to sell this content. How did you make that transition? And you also mentioned, kind of a follow-up to that, you mentioned the critique and some of the feedback you got. How important is that type of criticism, and how thick of a skin do you have to be a successful writer in this space?
Yeah, so I started to understand a little bit more about or learn about publishing. It was a bit by chance, I guess. I wanted to run a game that wasn't in Forgotten Realms, just to vary a little bit, because we've been playing Forgotten Realms for 20 years. And then I found a really nice adventure for free on Reddit. Someone posted it there, called The Army of the Damned in Innistrad. It's a plane shift from Magic the Gathering game. And the guy, Reddit's tag is 5-tailed Drake. And then I saw that that PDF looked like official PDFs, and I was, how the hell did they do that? And I asked him, and this is how I found about Homebrewery website. It's a website that allows you to create content like with the looks of the official content. So I started using that a lot. I even put my character backgrounds on that, so I have like dozens and dozens of stuff there. And then around mid 2018, I released my first Pay What You Want product on DM's Guild. But I don't really count it because I really didn't know what I was doing. So I had some downloads, some folks used it, but it got blocked because the logo type was wrong. So I didn't know how to handle the stuff. So I kind of gave up and allowed the title to be locked. Then mid-late 2019, I saw the traps from Path Peculiar, and I thought, this is pretty cool. Maybe I could do an adventure about that. So I used Tomb of Horror, Grimtooth, Tomb of Annihilation, Undermountain, and I created my real first paid module, which is the Great Trial. So this is how it all started. And to answer your second question, which is about critique. Back in March, I asked a reviewer to review my first product because I knew this was important. And it took a while, almost 6 months. So in August, the review came out. And the review was really, really, let's say, tough. When I read it, it was a bit tough to see what maybe the things I could have done better, because it was my first module. But after I assimilated, this is like any constructive feedback. When you get a constructive feedback, it doesn't feel good. It does. You don't feel like nice when you're hearing it. But after you reflect about it, you can really see that there are improvements that can be done. And the person that's telling you is making you a favor, actually. So what I did, I worked for 2 weeks and improved that product. and now the quality of this product is more on par with my more recent products, because of course, since it was my first product, I was still learning, and maybe the quality wasn't so good as my products are now. But now, if you get that product, you won't see that much of a difference in terms of quality.
Awesome. Yeah, it's my turn to ask a question. I guess with all this writing that you've done and continue to do, I guess, like what kind of things do you get your inspiration from? As far as building these modules and all these things that you've written and built.
Yeah, so the inspiration, I do a little bit of a mix, actually. I try to put in some personal projects, like for instance, the Great Trial was one. It's actually now a series. We are about to publish the third one, and if you count the one-page adventures, so that's going to be the fifth one for the Great Trial. Taron Deer was also a personal project, but I've also tried to do stuff that people might want. So there are different approaches. Some creators focus on, they write for themselves and then they sell that. And this is perfectly valid. There are many ways to go about it. What I do is a big mix of both. So some stuff are for me, but then I try to search what would people like. And Encounters in Barovia was one example. Encounters Icewind Dale was another one. Encounter with the Dark Powers was also an example of, I thought people might like this kind of stuff. So this is how I go about it. It's like, I have my own ideas. So it's kind of my backlog. If I don't have any other idea, I have this stuff that I can work on. But then I also try to work with Wizards of the Coast intellectual property, because, I mean, the website gets 50% of the cut because we are kind of using the IP. So we should make use of the IP as much as we can. So that's why we are publishing there, right?
Mm-hmm. That brings up an interesting question. I know that you're published on both DM's Guild and Drive-Thru RPG. Can you describe the difference between those two platforms and what type of content you submit to those two different venues?
Yeah, so Drive-Thru RPG, first of all, they are both from the same company, which is called OBS, One Bookshelf. And Drive-Thru RPG is a little bit, let's say, more open in the sense that you can publish any RPG there. You will see a lot of stuff. There's much more content in DTRPG than there is in the guild. However, if you're looking for 5e content, I would say that proportionally there's less content in Drive-Thru RPG and there's more content in the guild. Something else, another big difference is, like, in DTRPG, you cannot use any Wizards of the Coast intellectual property. You have to use the SRD. So it's called OGL. So it's basically the standard stuff. You cannot use the term Player's Handbook. You cannot use, you cannot mention Curse of Strahd. This is not allowed. However, you can release your own words, your own settings, and this is not a possibility in DM's Guild. So, for example, if you have a nice word created and you want to publish it, you have to use Drive-Thru RPG or Kickstarters, but you cannot use DM's Guild. Lastly, there's the difference about the royalties. So on the Guild, you get 50%, and on Drive-Thru RPG, you can get either 65 to 70%. So if you go for an exclusive model, you get 70%. And if you go for an open model, meaning that you can publish anywhere, then it's 65%. So those would be the differences.
I guess maybe getting into maybe your process a little bit. you know, you mentioned the RPG Writers Workshop, which is now the Storytellers Collective. I'm gonna screw that up for probably
No, you
another
got
2
it.
months.
You got it.
For another 2 months, I'm gonna, it's, you know, but maybe talk a little bit about like your process, like that you kind of go through, you know, as a writer, putting these things down and kind of refining them. I know, like I myself, and at least 2 of our viewers, you know, do writing and are always interested in, you know, learning about other people's processes and kind of how they're able to, especially at your level, for instance, compared to say my level, having not published before, are able to kind of streamline to actually get stuff out the door, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the process is similar, but it depends on the kind of product. So let's use Encounters in Barovia, which was a result of the Now Storytelling Collective. So I knew I would be in the workshop in November, and I knew I would want to write Encounters in Barovia. It's not an adventure, right? So usually the Storytelling Collective is a bit more focused on adventures, but it's somewhat related to an adventure because it's a series of encounters. So what I did is, one of my strategies for publishing is doing a lot of maps. So the first thing I did 1 week before, I did lots of maps. I started to map all kinds of stuff, like the old Valich Road. I don't know how to pronounce that, but that road that crosses Barovia. And then in the forest or close to a river, maybe a lake, I did other kind of maps. I did the Blood of the Vine Tavern. I did the St. Andrew Church. I did lots of maps. So when I started to write, I wrote the introduction to explain what is this product about. I used a specific template for that. It's a Google Docs template that kind of already puts it in the structure. And then I started first with like the events. I wanted to revamp some events. So I revamped 4 events, or I made follow-ups. Like for instance, is the St. Andrew's Feast from Curse of Strahd. There is a follow-up. So if the party manages to actually save the church and get back the bones, then the feast doesn't happen because the vampire spawn cannot open or enter into the church. So then what Strahd do is he sends in werewolves, and that this is the encounter I did. Afterwards, I went to new encounters. What I did, I took my maps and I would think what kind of encounter can I create on top of that map, and this is how I did it. Sometimes it would come very fast. Sometimes I would have to think about that map for 5-10 minutes until I had an idea. So this was for that product. I've been writing for the first time that I'm writing for a publisher, another publisher, not from DS Guild. I'm writing an adventure, and this is actually my first flat rate. So someone is like hiring me to write for them. And so I had to pitch an idea. So I had a rough outline when I pitched the idea, but then I had to like now write it. Right. So I would go about each part and think, what do I want on that part? So about plot hooks, I wrote a few outlines for plot hooks and then I detailed them. Great. So now we have the plot hooks. Next part is, I don't want to spoil the adventure. So I had 5 sets specific parts to write. And then for each part, I would kind of go on the higher level and start to then detail a little bit more until I had something that is now ready, let's say a first draft. So this is more or less my process.
Wow.
Fantastic. So really just kind of manageable chunks, you know?
Yes, exactly. It's easier for me.
I was just going to say, I like the idea of starting with the maps, because a lot of times for me, I have, when I'm just writing up something for my home games or for the stream that we have, you know, I'll start from like a location. Like there's a location that's something, there's an event at a location. Let's flesh out what the location looks like. And then I start to see it in my mind, and I can start to see how things, how events might flow through that space. So I can relate to that process a lot. But it sounds like you use different processes depending on the product that you're working on, really, to me, from what you just answered. You gave us sort of 3 different approaches that you use, which I think is interesting. I've talked to other authors who are very, very rigid in their process. You know, I start with an outline, or I start with, you know, I start at the end and work my way back, you know, that kind of thing. So it sounds like you've got a much more flexible approach to how you create, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, because I think that adventures and encounters products are very different. Like encounters products for me are a little bit simpler to do, because it's like a much more smaller focus, and let's say it's usually at most 1,000 words, and then an adventure can be up to, I don't know, 10,000, even more, 20,000 words. So I think it's a little bit more difficult. But what you said about the maps, actually, for me, it also makes more sense to go that way, because once I have a map, for me, it's easier to describe what's on the map, or instead of doing the opposite. So I will describe everything in text, and then I have to map what I described, and sometimes I will not have the assets I want, or I will lack maybe some feature that I would need to do that map the way I described it. So I usually start with the map, and then I go, you know, I simply describe in text what is in the map. So for me, this is simpler.
A question about maps. So you make a lot of maps, obviously. What apps do you use to do that? What kind of programs are you using for map making?
Yeah, so I use specifically Dungeon Draft, which is not the one I use the most. It's purely for battle maps. It's very good. It's a software you install. I think it's $20. Really recommend it. However, I use maybe 80% of the time Incarnate, which is web-based, and it's subscription model. It's like $25 a year. It looks a lot, but it's really not a lot, because once you go into the creation process, you start maybe selling the maps or getting commission. I mean, I'll just give an example. My first commission in April basically gave me 3 years of Incarnate. So everything that comes afterwards is like just extra. So it can be a bit expensive if you're using for your own homebrew game, and if you're not selling the maps. But both of them have commercial use. Don't have to worry about anything. You do have to you worry about custom assets. So you cannot simply download any asset and put them in the program, because then you might be infringing, you know, intellectual property from other artists. But in my opinion, and this varies a lot, there are many options around it, but my favorite tool is Incarnate. I love it. I am a fanboy of Incarnate, because it does frequent updates, and I have it for 1 year, and it did so many upgrades in 1 year. The tool got so much better. So this is the one I recommend.
Yeah, that's the one that I've been using quite a bit too. I really like it.
Nice.
What should we talk about next?
Well, one of the things that I had a question about was, you know, you mentioned earlier before we were live, when you and I were talking earlier today, about how, you know, I was under the impression that you've been publishing on DM's Guild and Drive Through RPG for, you know, a couple of years, or, you know, for a while, but you mentioned to me that you've been publishing for about a year. Is that correct?
It's going to be, I released my first paid module, which is the Great Trial, on February 29, meaning that on the 28th, because we won't have a 29 this year, it's going to be 1 year.
Hey, congratulations. That's awesome.
Wow.
That's really
Thanks.
cool. So following up on that, I mean, in that 12-month period, or 11.5-month period since then, you've published a lot. And so, one of the questions I had is, how do you find the time? Is this something that you do professionally? So this is your full-time job? And then yes or no, but how do you schedule this? Do you block time out? Do you have target dates and deadlines that you set for yourself? Let's walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so indeed, I've kind of published quite some stuff already for 1 year. Basically, the time is, it's a bit simple in my case. I've always been a little bit addicted to video games since maybe I was 8. So it's been more than 2 decades since I played video games and all this kind of stuff. So I love, for instance, PlayStation, and I would play maybe over 20 hours a week of video game. So I played so many games, and I was pretty into that. And then my wife would often tell me, like, you should do something more useful with your day and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then at some point, I thought, well, let's give it a try. So I went into publishing. At the very beginning, I wasn't like so hardcore. I would still play video game. So last year, I managed to play some Borderlands 3. But then I started to get a little bit more into that, and I had less and less time to play video games. I was in a big project that maybe was for 2 or 3 months. I barely played a video game. And then the timing was really great, because when I finished that project, I got the opportunity to play The Last of Us 2. Such a great game. So I kind of finished it really fast. But then I got back to content creation. So my stuff is, I simply replaced video game time for content creation time, which might not work for everyone, because people still need to take care about themselves, to have fun and all this kind of stuff. But I'm having a lot of fun doing content creation. So for me, it's all right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And answering your second question about like how I organize myself. So last year, I wasn't that busy. So it was kind of streamlined. I would work in one project after the other. So it was a little bit simpler. But this year it's a bit hectic. So I'm trying to use tools like Notion. It's like a organization website or tool you can use, can track projects and stuff. I have been trying to use that board you see over there, here, but it's a physical board, and I'm not too used about it yet. So this is an ongoing process, because there is a calendar there, so I kind of put like what project I should work at which day. But yeah, I'm trying to organize myself a little bit better, because even though I'm very good at organization, and this is something I got a feedback at work, at my day job, I am very good at organization skills and time management skills. And at work, I use Outlook, but I often rely on my brain and my memory. And right now, I don't want to risk that, because I have so many projects that I'm starting to put from my brain to the internet. So I have a bit more support.
Wow.
How that goes.
Yeah.
What speaking of things you got in the you're working on within I guess reason, I know that some people talking about things that are coming out or aren't announced yet are kind of tight-lipped about things, which I always personally find super strange, because I want to talk about everything. But what are some things that you can talk about that you're excited to talk about? Yeah, what should people know about?
Well, like I just mentioned, I have really a lot of stuff going on. So I adopted a slightly different strategy for 2021, right? So my 2020 was much better than I anticipated. When I went into this in February, I had no idea what to expect, and I ended the year. I even wrote a blog about that, so it's no secret. I mean, it's in my blog. I provided a financial breakdown because this is something that really helps creators when you can see the potential of the business, and I also give some tips. But anyways, my biggest successes in 2020 were solo products, meaning that were products that I kind of had the biggest participation. But of course, no product is 100% solo because you need an editor. And in case of Ravenloft products, I even brought in a Ravenloft consultant who helped make the product even better.
Wow.
But then again, in 2021, I wanted to work on a personal project that is a very bold and big project. It's called Chesenta's Tyranny. It's basically I have 120 pages already in Portuguese, so it's not a project I'm starting from scratch. But it's basically, Chesenta is a Greek-style empire nation set in the old empires that is located south of the Sea of the Fallen Star in Forgotten Realms. So it's not your usually Sword Coast stuff. It is neighbor to Uther, that is like a Sumerian nation, and then neighbor to Mulyoran, that is Egyptian. Mm-hmm. And all these folks are actually, in the lore canon, they are from Earth. It's weird, but the High Imascari, they kind of opened a portal to Earth, and they brought like Greeks, Sumerian, and Egyptians, and made them slaves to do stuff for them. So I didn't know about this, but then when I researched, I was really surprised to learn that they are like descendant from Earth. Okay, so anyways, it's weird, but and the project is about a tyranny. So one of the war hero wanted to break the cycle of wars, and she implemented a kind of peace regime. But she ends up over the years becoming a tyrant, and the whole module is a campaign from 1 to 11 where the players who have the opportunity to start a rebellion, grow it up to the point they are strong enough to face this tyrant, and then maybe remove it from power. But there is a plot twist. Actually, it's not so simple. But this is a huge project. Yeah. Huge project. It's like I don't know. It's gonna be 200 pages. I have no idea. But I have 2 writers working with me. I have there's gonna be 2 editors and one layout artist and 1 specific artist. What happens is that I don't have much time because of that, but I want to keep doing stuff. So I used a different strategy. Is I invited many different kinds of writers to write with me. I mean, they would do the writing and I would do all the rest, aside from editing, because I'm not an editor. So I still need editors for all my projects. And I got lots of people interested in working with me. So this was really nice. And I'm going to list now some of the stuff that will come, and you will see that it's a lot of stuff besides the tyranny, which I mentioned. And the tyranny is like May or June. So this is a little bit far away. So there is going to be the 3rd module for the Great Trials. The Great Trial is called the Great Trial Dunes. So there is this TV show, I guess, Dunes, that's out, right? There is also a movie and a game about dunes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's a similar vibe in the sense that it's a desert, but it's like there is this wizard that never accomplished anything really relevant in life, although he is very powerful. But it was over the course of centuries. He got very powerful, but never did anything very meaningful. So he started to create these trials. And this edition of this adventure is set in a desert. There's a pyramid. It's very similar to Tube of Horror. So it's challenging, it's hard, it's hex crawl. So it's a little bit more on the vibe or on a hard mode than maybe something very happy. it's not a happy story.
It's not. It's not happy. It's not happy like Encounters in Barovia.
Oh yeah, I mean Encounters in yeah, Encounters in Barovia is actually a bit more darker, even because Barovia is really messed up.
Yeah.
I have a story about this later point if you get into. But then I also have Encounters in Candlekeep going out. So this time a little bit close to the Candlekeep Mysteries official book. So what else? Barovian Born and Raised. So this is like a module where there's going to be guidelines for people to play as native Barovians in Curse of Strahd. So basically, you're going to rise against Strahd. Yeah, rise against Strahd. It's a tough challenge.
Yeah, I like it. That sounds awesome.
Something else that's going to come is a product line that I call Gap Products. Gap Products, because the idea with this product line is to kind of fill gaps. So most of the official modules are great and they are very good, but I don't know all of them. But they always have some gaps or some stuff that could be done differently or better. And some of them even have black and white maps from Dyson logos.
Right. And
that's all right. However, they don't have VTT versions and they don't have color versions. So we are creating encounters products based on the official modules. So here they come. So for instance, there's going to be Deeper Descent into Avernus. Pretty obvious what it's going to be. Encounters in Cult. I don't know how to pronounce Cult, but it's like Cult. Yeah, Cult. Yeah. Encounters is in Saltmarsh. So this might be interesting to you for Beyond Saltmarsh. There's going to be Horde of the Dragon Queen Expanded. Also very obvious what this is. And all of these products have a similar format. They provide maps in the same quality I usually do maps. So I like to be very detailed on the maps. I never seek perfection though, because if I seek perfection in each and every map, I won't be putting out maps. So I seek high quality, but I don't look for perfection because this will kind of slow me down. So if you check most of my maps, you will see that they are, at least from what people tell me, they are very good. People really like them, they enjoy them, but I will never try to improve them for hours and hours and hours until they get perfect, because I don't think this is the most efficient way to go about it. So I aim for a high quality, but within like a threshold. And encounters. So it's a mix of maps plus encounters, and sometimes revamping some stuff that are already in the books. So this is what I can tell you for now.
You have a lot on your plate, Christian. I guess I'm wondering, do you still find time to run games or play in role-playing games?
Yeah, so I have a main group. I must admit that a while back I had more groups because I wanted to play test stuff, and I had way too many groups, so I canceled all the groups. I still do playtest in a different way now, but I kept only my main group, who is with my 20 years old 20 friends that I know from 20 years, a long time, 2 decades, and I play now because I finished DMing Curse of Strahd, and now I am a player in Tomb of Annihilation. But I use that time to do something that is not ideal, but because I have so much on my plate, I map while I play. And this might be weird, but it works. I am able to put in productive time while play. And I know when I have to pay more attention to the game, I will pause my mapping process. But when there is maybe something, when there is a combat or something, I am able to do both stuff at the same time, because mapping for me is like it's a bit of a once I have an idea what I want on the map, it's kind of a matter of putting the assets on the tool, and this is rather automatic. Sometimes sometimes it's even very repetitive when I have to do hundreds of times the same stuff. So it works. Of course, it's not like as I would be like 100% of the time paying attention to the game. However, I'm still more, let's say, like I know more details about what's going on in the game than some of my colleagues that are not like mapping. They are probably subbing on their smartphones.
Yeah, they're playing
Yep.
Candy Crush on their phones is what they're
Probably,
doing. Yeah.
probably, yeah. So at least I'm doing something productive.
Right. To bring sort of this
Wow.
conversation sort of full circle, you know, you and I met through play testing for Encounters in Barovia. How
Yeah.
obviously play testing is important for creators who are creating adventures and encounters to find out, you know, what needs to be tweaked or get some feedback. How important is that for your products? How do you go about finding play testers, and then how do you solicit and utilize feedback?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, playtest is very important, and there a while back there was a discussion like, is it like mandatory or not? And of course we are like small creators, but I still think it's important to run them. What we usually cannot do is like extensively run playtest over and over, like running 10 playtests. This is not possible because we're small. So the way I go about it is usually do one, at most two playtests, and uh, just one moment, my daughter is calling me.
You bet.
She closed the door. Okay,
Okay.
that's fine. I think she noticed that I cannot talk. So usually one playtest at least. And the way I go about it is I use either Facebook, Twitter, or Discord to try to find playtesters. And nowadays, since I'm involved with other folks writing the stuff, I ask them to run their own playtests, because when I was in the very big collaboration that is Tasha Crucibles to everything else. Oh no, sorry, Tasha Crucibles to everything. It's that the product has been on the top 10 for a while in the guild. It's basically an alternate version for Tasha. We had 25 creators, so it was a huge collaboration, and the project manager from that project was really organized and really good, much better than I am. He had everything like in Excel sheets and really timelines, and he was really good. And one of the tests we had at some point was we had to run playtests, and I thought it was fair. So I'm doing a similar approach. So I'm asking the writers to run playtests for the stuff they write. So this is how I go about it.
Interesting.
And then we get the feedback.
Yeah.
We get the feedback, and when we make adjustments, right? And it's usually not rewrites. It's basically mostly improvements. So if I give you an example, you were on Encounters in Barovia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Playtesting it.
Yes.
Right, and do you recall there was an encounter that was really deadly because of one path you chose that I didn't plan for it. You decided to kind of get into a fight with the werewolf alpha, and this was like really deadly. So I adapted the encounter to make it less deadly because it was a TPK.
Yeah. I think I think when you have playtesters playtesting, they're liable to make some very interesting decisions that maybe they wouldn't make if they were in a campaign trying to keep their characters alive.
Yeah,
that was one of those.
True.
That was one of those situations for sure.
For real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, we have a question from the chat now, finally.
Oh, all right. Let's hear it.
Nice.
So Pete Lutenberger was a fantastic name. He asks, what are your go-to techniques for improvisation, and kind of in your experience, what things cannot be improvised, relating to, like, you know, maps or NPCs or plots, monsters, etc.
Yeah. Well, improvisation is a skill that needs to be kind of honed by every DM, right? And it's not an easy one. I am not. I must admit, I am not the master of improvisation, but every DM needs to use improvisation at some point, and most likely every session, because players do all different stuff all the time. The key I think one thing that helps a lot, it's maybe not the most useful answer, but experience. If you know what kind of game you're running, if you know your players, and if you know the objective of that game, you can improvise stuff that will still look good. So I'm going to give a brief example. In Curse of Strahd, I hope this is. I'm just worried that this might be a spoiler, but I won't be more generic.
Curse
There
of
was a
Strahd's been
time
out
in
for a
which,
while.
yeah, well, basically, the barbarian killed the mayor in front of the whole town. This was not expected, and this generated a whole session of improvisation because I didn't expect that. So I had to run and try to think. So how would the guards, react? What would be kind of the punishment? And and then, well, the punishment is death, right? Isaac will kind of cut your head. But then the player managed to charm Isaac, and then he saved the guy that was about to lose his head. And then what happens afterwards? And then a lot of stuff happened, and I had to think. So now they want to kill Isaac because he knows he's been charmed. Okay, so okay, let's see what happens. And they wanted to even kind of get rid of the body to kind of so lots of stuff happened. But once you know your players, you know what kind of game you're running. Um, you can roll, go with the flow,
Yeah.
one step up after the other. There's no way to plan for improvisation. You have to kind of have a gut feeling, and your group will still love it. They will not know that you haven't planned for that.
Yeah. And honestly, like the content that, professionally developed content, amateur content, homebrew content, it's really a jumping off point. I mean, improvisation from my perspective takes place every single session. And the beauty of collaborative storytelling is that oftentimes that serendipity that requires the improvisation results in a whole new storyline that you never even expected would happen at all. So I think that's really fun. We're running out of time here. So I want to just say, Christian, thank you so much for joining us today, spending some time talking about your creative process and your experience. I want to make sure that folks are aware that, let's see if I can point to it. Yeah, over down there below Christian, there is a link to the product that he's got a promo code for us. The link is also in the chat there for you. Go check out Christian's stuff. Christian, we can find you on Twitter at czeuch1. What is there anything else that you want to say before we sign off here?
I want to thank you as well for the opportunities. It was really cool to talk to you folks, and also to get to know you better. I also didn't know Chad, so nice to meet you, Chad.
Yes, likewise.
And yeah, I think you mentioned all the rest. If you have any kind of follow-up questions, maybe you have something you're curious to know, you can send me a DM or go to my website. It's czrpg.com, very simple, czrpg.com, and leave a message there as well on my contact form. And I will be very happy to interact with you as well.
Awesome.
It was really cool.
Thanks a lot, Christian. We really appreciate it. And we'll have you back on again sometime to talk about some of your new stuff that's coming out. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hey, if you're still around, thanks for sticking around. I had fun. I'm pretty sure everyone else who was involved in the stream here had fun. So hopefully you had fun, and more importantly, learned how to do some stuff. It was great. Yeah, remember you can find Christian at czeuch1 on Twitter. He has a website that I forgot already. But it's on his Twitter. You go to his Twitter.
CZRPG.
CZRPG. Thanks, Dave. He's in my ear now, not on the screen. Remember, coming up this week, we do not have our Beyond Saltmarsh game. We will have our next Roll Your Doom in 2 weeks on February 27th. We will be back for Beyond Salt March on February 24th on Wednesday. Remember, we'll be talking with Jeff Stevens in a very similar manner to this one. It'll be great. We'll learn stuff. We'll get to know Jeff. We'll talk about processes and products, and it's gonna be amazing. As always, thanks for joining us here on Roll Your Doom and the Guild. Man, see, I did it again at the Superior Adventurers Guild at Guild Superior on Twitter, on Twitch, and YouTube. I'm NorthShoreDM, aka at RealCMG on the Twitters. Dave is at D_M_Dave.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure he didn't say anything, so it must be it. As always, have a great day, and yeah, happy Saturday.